Jennifer mentioned something about interactions with the public. Well, here we come to, I think, is perhaps the very interesting and important part of our discussion. We're going to invite you to come up here and raise any question, raise any comments that you would like. We have about 10 minutes to do so. So anyone have a question or something else? Would you please come over here so we can hit it? Unfortunately, we don't have a traveling mic, and so I'm going to have to ask you, if you could state your name and then...
Yes, I'm John Schilling with the Millennium Institute, and many of you probably know our president, Hans Herren. He was very involved with the United Nations in setting up these Millennium Development Goals and figuring out how to measure them. And the Millennium Institute has developed a Threshold 21 system dynamic model that links economic, social, and environmental factors. So it incorporates all of these sustainable development goals into a single framework. And we're still developing the model that has all those details. Our model that we've applied in over 40 countries has all the Millennium Development Goals in to show progress. So it takes account of the different things and what each country has to do. And we developed a model, a version of the model for UNEP for their Green Economy report that globally showed how shifting 2% of global investment to the great green kind of activities would achieve more growth than business as usual, while meeting the critical environmental sustainability standards of reducing the footprint to one planet, of reducing CO2 emissions to a sustainable level and things like that. So this approach is there and exists, and we're very happy to work more with ISIS or with other groups in applying the model or adapting models we have applied to address many of these goals and taking a very integrated approach and generates long-term scenarios so you can see what has to happen over time. And our dream is to work together with a bunch of people to take the individual country models, and we can integrate the models into, say, a regional or continental model and a global model, so you can see how different policies in different countries will have a broader global effect. Because policies that might look good in a country may have negative side effects and things like that. So I'm very happy to talk to anybody more about how this can be applied, where we've applied it in many countries, and how we're very happy to work together with people doing it in more places.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have a comment here? Next, please give your name.
Yes, my name's John Gardenier. I'm retired now, but I've spent most of my career in operations research and statistics. And my concern is the underutilization of a proven systems analysis method, and that is Moore's Law and its correlates. We still are not applying Moore's Law adequately. We know that the rate of cost versus productivity in computing is continuing to gallop along at a relatively stable rate, and we're still not predicting the future, which is pretty predictable in terms of areas of jobs that are going to be impacted in the next 20 years and so forth. But it's more discernible in some of the sustainable development goals, not all of them, but I think particularly of energy. And I'd like to just concentrate on three, although there are many areas outside of energy and many more areas in energy. Number one is solar, both photovoltaic and collector. They have Moore's Law coefficients. We don't know what they are because nobody's doing the work to pin down those coefficients. Similarly, high-capacity energy storage and high-capacity energy transmission. All of these have Moore's Law correlates. All of them are researchable, and as far as I can tell, nobody's doing it. I can't understand why not.
Comments? Next.
Well, thank you. I'm Alan Heck with the EPA, U.S. EPA, as you know. And I want to say I think the points made by the team were very important. I just wanted to raise two questions. First, I think the concept of systems thinking and integrating these goals is crucial. We have struggled as an agency, and I think we've struggled as a country on a more integrated approach. And one of the challenges I'd like to see how you think we can best move ahead is promoting the integrated approach, especially in federal activities, and who really is going to be able to do that. The second one is, I think you've talked about population and education. Projected population growth is also going to mean increases, significant increases, between 30 and 50% in water, energy, and food use. And I think one of the critical challenges, and I'd like to see your comment on that, is how we can be more anticipatory of what is going to happen. While we may be moving to advance these goals, remember, these population increases and trends are going to have huge impact. So mobilizing the federal government, partnership with the business world, getting a common sense of a need for a systems approach and being out front is going to be a very crucial challenge to effectively implement all of these goals. But thank you very much for your participation today.
Wolfgang or Bill, why don't you start with?
Well, actually, it's a comment on both of the last statements. And like this Moore's law may well apply in specific technologies, but it's precisely why we need to have a systemic view where there are interdependencies and one trend may influence the other trend. And there are nonlinearities of all kinds. There may be tipping points and collapse and whatever. So yes, there may be regularities in certain sectors, but the challenging, exciting, and most dangerous, on the other hand, is these interactions that we do not yet fully understand, but we have to get a handle on. And the same is to the previous question here, when, yes, of course, population growth is not an independent phenomenon. And it is true that most of the existing population projections, be it from the UN or the US Census Bureau, and so, sort of see it somehow as an exogenous thing. That will, of course, require more food for more people and all the other things, but there's no feedback from the agricultural system or whatever on the mortality and on the fertility, or from the education system on the fertility, which we try to incorporate. So the challenge is really incorporating these feedbacks. And that is, of course, terribly difficult because we don't have the solid scientific base for this. That's why defining alternative scenarios is a common way of dealing with this. So we have alternative, consistent, multidimensional storylines. We don't know exactly which one is more likely, but at least we try to draw some pictures of these interactions and that go in different ways.
Well, I'm a statistician, so I'm going to think about access to data and transparency as a way to facilitate this integration systems approach. Certainly, in the absence of data and statistics and lacking documentation of how those statistics were created, one works with scenarios, one works with hypotheses. And what I think what we're really working on, and we're working with our colleagues in the UNECE in particular, is a way to report progress against the indicators for the SDGs in a way that ensures data integrity, but also improves public access. And what I mean by that is for the Millennium Development Goals, as many of you may be familiar, more than half of those statistics were actually the result of modeling by international organizations. And that reflects the statistical capacity of those national offices that were engaged in the MDGs. But the Sustainable Development Goals are different. We have a newer attempt to participate in making data available that reflects really what we know as a government in the United States, and to make that available to all data users, not just researchers, not just folks who downloaded a file or understand better what one department does versus another, but to really make the information available in through a platform that's accessible by all. And that's one step in the right direction, but I think it's necessary. And certainly continuing to rely on third parties to produce statistics where another government is responsible for the outcome is not the way we want to proceed. We really want to enable other governments to produce their own statistics and understand how they were developed and be accountable for them. Thanks.
I mentioned the Global Sustainable Development Report, which I think is an opportunity both for trying to get more systems integrated thinking into this, as well as some of the issues associated with developing the indicators in the framework. The way the Global Sustainable Development Report works, the UN agencies produced a prototype report in 2014, the first one in 2015, but the process going now is every 4 years there's going to be a massive report. But in between now and I guess 2020, the next one, there'll be a report each year that will focus on a small set of issues to try to help stimulate thinking. And in the 2015 report, there was a fair amount of discussion related to integrative issues and to trade-offs. But I think it'd be very good. IIASA might be interested in proposing to shepherd essentially a report looking exactly on that issue. And the same thing with all the issues associated with the indicators in the framework. It'd be very nice to have a chapter appearing in one of these reports over the next 4 years that's sort of focused on the issues, produce the chapter written perhaps by the UN Commission. So it is an opportunity to get some of these issues into a broader discussion among the UN member states as well as the UN technical agencies.
Very good. You want a last comment?
Brad Holtz with the Center for Understanding Change. I have two questions. One, with respect to the metrics and targets, have you started to map out the interrelationship or the causal loop diagram between them? I think that would be a fascinating piece of work to see how that interaction works and to work with the Millennium Institute, for instance, in modeling that. But with respect to the education and the relationship between education and population, there's an assumption in the charts that you've produced where it's talking about primary, secondary, tertiary education. We are also at the same time seeing massive changes in the way we are going to be delivering an uplift of the population. And the traditional methods of primary, secondary, and tertiary education is likely to at least be effective, if not significantly evolved. What I'd like to hear about is your thoughts on how these potential changes are likely to impact, either accelerate or slow down your assumptions as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's a data issue to start with. We have sort of the data that is readily available are the ISCAT, the International Standard Classifications given by UNESCO, and anything that goes beyond it is only available for a certain subset of countries. And there's the quality issue of education, which makes a difference. Because going 10 years to education in one country may mean something different from another. Also, at the very basic level, let's say with consequences for infant mortalities of women who've never been to school versus having been 1 or 2 years to school, even if it's a bad education, they have some benefit from this. And yes, there is. I mean, it's really not well understood yet how the whole mobile phone revolution in Africa, where people, well, you need to at least be able to read in order to properly operate a mobile phone. So there is a threshold there. But on the other hand, of course, it's a big incentive to learn how to read if you have a mobile phone and see other people using it. So there we are just at the beginning of understanding this. But in the general modeling, there are certain factors such these spread of new technologies that either sort of accelerate the process or in other respects also can retard it. So we can play with these parameters. But generally on a global level, we just don't have a sufficient understanding yet to explicitly include it in our scenarios.
I can speak to the question on interlinkages again from a data and statistics perspective. So there is a subgroup within the IAEG that is actively exploring interlinkages and a way to identify efficiencies in providing data and addressing methodological issues that could improve measurement across multiple targets. Again, not prioritizing one goal over another, but just thinking efficiently. What would lift up the most? What's the best bang for our buck? So those are the kinds of analyses that I'm more familiar with and will become available to the group once the indicators have been announced.
Yeah, Pavel made, I thought, a very cogent remark, but one that was related to the fact that no one anticipated the drop in the price of oil. It was due to the technological revolution, alternative sources of oil and gas, fracking and so on that did that. So trying to keep our minds open to these big surprises that are likely going to occur over the next few years that can be very disruptive to our kind of planning, the kind of scenarios that we deal with. None of us can predict the future, but at least being aware of what some of the possibilities are that come from this very rapid progress being made in all kinds of technological areas.
I think we're going to conclude at this stage right here. What happens is that we're just as running out of time here, but I'm sure you have many, many other questions, comments you would like to raise. Be sure to take advantage of the coffee break. Now, we're running about 25 minutes because we started late, 25 minutes later, but at the coffee break, please take advantage of it and talk to some of these speakers. I want to thank the three of them for... and Bob?